Hook kept verbatim. The ending from about a year later through Ride Safe Out There kept verbatim. Every beat intact. I trimmed padding and repetition across the middle, Boone's intro, Delia's account, the standoff monologues, and the deputies peeling away. A fist smashed into the side of a young woman's face. She spun and went down hard onto the gravel shoulder. Blood ran from her lip into the dust. Cars slowed. Drivers stared through their windows. Then they hit the gas and drove on, one after another. Nobody stopped. Nobody rolled down a window. She pushed herself up on one arm and started walking, one bare foot dragging, the highway shimmering with heat all around her. That's when 40 engines went quiet at once. A big man in a leather cut threw up his fist, and the whole convoy died behind him. His name was Boone Kessler, and he'd killed men for less than what he was looking at. He climbed off his bike with an old three-legged dog beside him. What Boone did when the police cruiser rolled up will stop you cold. Stay with me on this one. Now, you have to understand who was leading that run. Boone Kessler was 61 years old, and he wore it in his hands. Big hands, scarred across the knuckles. He was a road captain for the Hells Angels out of the high desert, which meant on any run, 40 men rode where he pointed and stopped where he stopped. He was not a small man. Military big, thick through the neck, gray in his beard, arms like something you'd tie a boat to. He'd done 2 tours a lifetime ago, a stretch in prison after that, and buried more friends than he could count. Every man in that convoy had watched Boone do something once that made them fall in line for good. He didn't ask for the respect. He'd just never once been the man who looked away. And that's exactly what this ride was. A memorial run. One of the old guard, a man they called Pockets, had gone into the ground 3 days before, and 40 bikes had rolled out that morning to carry his name down Route 66 one last time. It was July, 106 degrees on the asphalt, and Boone had his dog with him like always. Diesel, an old German shepherd, gray in the face, missing a back leg from a night nobody liked to talk about. Diesel rode in a sidecar and had logged more highway miles than most men ever will. The two of them had come up together, the old man and the old dog, and somewhere along the way they'd stopped needing to look at each other to know what the other one was thinking. So there they were, 40 bikes, thunder rolling east when Boone saw her through the heat shimmer. A shape on the shoulder, small, wrong, moving like something broken. He didn't slow down easy. He threw up his fist and 40 engines cut. In that whole roaring machine, one man's hand could stop everything. That's the kind of authority he had. And in the sudden quiet, you could hear her. She was crying, trying not to. That's worse, somehow, when somebody's fighting to keep the sound in. Boone swung his leg off the bike before it had fully settled. Diesel dropped out of the sidecar and padded along beside him, 3 legs and all, right at his knee. Boone walked slow. He knew what a scared animal looked like, and this girl was a scared animal, face swelling on the left side, lips split, one eye already going dark, bare feet on a road hot enough to cook an egg. Her waitress apron was torn half off. There was gravel ground into her palms where she'd fallen more than once. "Hey," Boone said, soft as he had it. "Hey now, I'm not gonna touch you, I'm just gonna sit down right here." And he did. This huge man, he lowered himself down into the gravel a good 10 feet from her, so she'd be looking down at him instead of up. He'd learned that somewhere. You make yourself small for a person who's been made small. He pulled a canteen off his belt and set it on the ground between them. "Water," he said. "It's just water. You take it when you want it." She stared at him, stared at the 40 men behind him, all of them off their bikes now, none of them coming closer. Stared at the dog. Diesel lay down flat in the dirt and put his chin on his paws, and something about that, about the broken old dog just lying there, made her breath hitch. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Boone asked. It took her a while. "Delia," she said, barely a whisper. "Delia Mercer." All right, Delia Mercer. He started to peel off his cut, and under it his leather jacket, and he laid the jacket on the gravel and slid it toward her with 2 fingers. You put that on. I know it's hot. Doesn't matter. When a body's been through a shock, it goes cold from the inside. Trust me on that. She reached for the water. Her hand was shaking so bad she could hardly hold it. She got it to her mouth and half of it ran down her chin, and she didn't seem to notice. And when she'd drunk, when she'd got a little something back in her, she looked up at him with that one good eye, and she said the thing that changed the whole afternoon. You have to go, she said. Please, all of you have to go. He's coming. He's right behind me. Who's coming? The man who did this. Her voice cracked all the way down the middle. And you can't touch him. Nobody can touch him. He's got a badge. Now, Boone Kessler had heard a lot of things kneeling in a lot of dirt. But that one landed different. Say that again, he said. He's a deputy. She was crying openly now, pointing back down the highway west into the heat. That's his cruiser. He does this. He's done it before to other girls, and nobody believes them because who they gonna call him? She dragged in a breath that shook the whole way down. I served him coffee for 2 years. And then last night he waited till closing and he told me I was coming with him. And when I said no, he showed me what no gets you out here. She grabbed at Boone's sleeve with both torn hands. He said if I ran he'd say I stole from the register, put me in a cell where nobody would ever ask. So please, just go. If he sees you talking to me, it'll be worse. And Boone looked down the highway west where a shape was rising up out of the mirage, white and black, rolling slow, a light bar on top, dark for now, coming right for them. He looked at that cruiser a long moment. He'd seen a lot of bad men in his life. He'd been one of them if you asked certain people, and he wouldn't have argued. But there was a particular kind of bad that made his jaw go tight, and it was the kind that hunted people who couldn't hunt back. Then he stood up. All 6 foot, however, of him, unfolding out of the gravel like something the desert had been keeping. Delia, he said, real quiet, not looking at her. I'm gonna need you to sit tight and let me handle the talking. No, you don't understand, Heel. I understand more than you think I do. He reached down without looking and set his hand flat on Diesel's head. You just breathe. You're not walking another step down this road today. That part's over. Behind him, without a word from anyone, 40 men shifted. It wasn't loud. It was just 40 men, quiet, moving into a loose line across the shoulder so that the girl was behind them and the road was in front of them. Nobody drew anything. They just stood. And you have to understand, these were not choir boys. Half of them had records. All of them had reasons to want nothing to do with a police cruiser, but not one of them got back on his bike. The cruiser slowed. Then it stopped, maybe 30 feet off, engine idling, and for a second nothing happened at all. The door opened. The man who got out was younger than Boone by 20 years and built for it, tall, Jim Hard, sunglasses, that flat cop haircut, tan uniform, a gun on his hip and his hand resting on it easy like it lived there. He had a smile on. That's the part Boone would remember. The man was smiling. Afternoon, gentlemen, the deputy said. He looked past all of them, right at Delia on the ground. That girl there is a suspect in a theft. She assaulted an officer and fled. I'll be taking her into custody now. Y'all can get back on your bikes. Nobody moved. Boone stepped forward just 1 step so he was out ahead of his line. That's so, he said. That's so, the deputy's smile tightened. You want to be interfering with a peace officer, old man, 40 to 1, and you still lose that math, because I got a radio and you got a rap sheet. I can smell it on you. Probably can, Boone agreed, pleasant as Sunday. Here's my trouble, though. This young lady's got no shoes, got a split lip and an eye swole shut. And I'm looking at your right hand and your knuckles are all tore up. So I'm doing my own little detective work here, deputy, and it's not adding up the way you're telling it. Maybe she fought when I cuffed her. That happens. Maybe. Except a woman who assaults an officer, you generally bring her in. You don't leave her walking barefoot down a highway 12 miles from anywhere. So no, I don't think you cuffed her at all. I think she got away from you and you came back to fix that. Boone tilted his head. How am I doing? For a half-second the smile slipped, just a flicker. And in that flicker Boone saw everything he needed to know. But here's the thing about men like that deputy. They live and die by the idea that nobody will ever call the bluff. That the badge is a wall nobody climbs. And so far in his life nobody had. Every time he'd leaned on somebody they'd folded. That's how a man like that learns the world works. The world keeps proving him right. You're making a mistake, the deputy said, and now his hand tightened on the gun. A real big mistake. This is your one chance to ride away. And Boone Kessler, 61 years old, hands like boat cleats, looked at that young man a long, slow moment. Then he smiled back, and he said, "Nah, I don't think I'll be doing that." You could have heard a pin drop on that highway. 40 men, 1 cop, 1 beaten girl, 1 three-legged dog, and 106 degrees pressing down on all of it. And then slow, the deputy took his hand off his gun. He raised both palms easy like a man showing he's got nothing to hide. He was still smiling. "All right," he said. "You know what? You're right, my mistake. Girl's clearly hurt. Should have called an ambulance first thing." He shook his head, all rueful. "It's been a long shift. Let me just go make that call. Get her some help. No sense in all of us cooking out here." And he backed up, got in his cruiser, and drove off west back the way he came, and the light bar never came on, and the dust settled behind him, and he was gone, just like that. For a second nobody believed it. Then the whole line of men let their shoulders down. One of the younger riders laughed, that shaky laugh you laugh when a thing you braced for doesn't come. Boone turned back to Delia and crouched down again, and there was something almost gentle in his big, ruined face. "See," he said, "told you that part's over." They got her up off the gravel, slow, 1 man on each side, and set her on the seat of a bike so her feet were off the hot road. Somebody found a spare pair of socks. Somebody else cracked open a fresh water and put it in her hands. Diesel leaned his whole gray weight against her shins and stayed there. And Boone, he pulled out a battered notebook from his saddlebag, the kind he wrote memorial names in, and he sat down beside her and said, "When you're ready, and only when you're ready, I want you to tell me his name. Just so I've got it. That's all." She let out a breath that seemed to come from her boots. She wiped her one good eye. For the first time all day, she wasn't running. The desert was quiet. The men were quiet. It was over. That's what everybody on that shoulder believed. They were wrong, because a whisper ran down the line. One of the men at the far end, a rider named Tuck who'd been watching the West Road, said it low, but in that quiet it carried to every ear. "He's back and he ain't alone." Boone stood up. Coming out of the heat shimmer now weren't 1 set of headlights. There were 4, 2 more cruisers, a pickup with a rack of lights on it, and that first white and black out front rolling slow and mean. The deputy hadn't driven off to get her help. He'd driven off to get his own. And here is where it stopped being about 1 bad man and 1 hurt girl. Because when those cars fanned out across Route 66 and blocked it in both directions, and men in tan uniforms started climbing out with shotguns and long guns, Boone Kessler understood exactly what he was looking at. This wasn't one deputy anymore. This was the whole rotten piece of it. The ones who covered for him. The ones who'd buried the other girls' reports in a drawer somewhere and gone home and slept fine. A little machine of men with badges who had all agreed, a long time ago, that out here on this stretch of desert, they were the only law that would ever exist. And a machine like that doesn't fight to protect 1 man. It fights to protect the machine. Because the second one girl's story sticks, they all go down together and every one of them knew it. The deputy stepped out front again. No smile now. "Here's how it's gonna go," he called out. "You're all gonna get face down on this road, and that girl comes with us. And by tomorrow morning, ain't none of this ever happened. Now listen. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because stories like this one about people the world drove past and the strangers who wouldn't, these are the ones that get buried. Help me keep telling them. All right, back to the road, because Boone Kessler didn't get face down. He walked out into the middle of Route 66, into the open ground between 40 bikers and 5 vehicles full of armed men, and he stood there alone in the heat with his hands loose at his sides. Diesel started to follow, and Boone said one word, "Stay," and the old dog stopped. "You boys have got a problem," Boone said, loud enough to carry. "And it's not the one you think. Your problem is I already know all your faces, and so do 40 other men. And so does the girl. Now you can shoot your way out of that. Sure. 5 carloads of you against 40 of us out here where there's no witnesses. Maybe you win. Maybe there's a lot of bodies in the sand tonight and you spend the rest of your lives pretending. But I don't think you've got the stomach for a real fight, because men who beat waitresses on the side of the road never do." "You don't know a thing about us," the deputy said. "I know exactly one thing about you. I know not a single man standing behind you came out here to die. They came to lean on some old bikers and watch us fold, same as everybody always folds. And now you're all standing in the sun realizing this one's gonna cost more than you figured." Boone let that sit. "You feel it yet? That's the feeling of the price going up." The deputy racked his shotgun. "Last warning." "Not done." Boone reached up real slow and pulled his phone out of his vest pocket and held it up over his head. "Because 40 men and every one of them's got one of these. And the second you started fanning out across this road, I had my boys start filming. Live. Not saved to a phone you can smash. Sent. Out. Already gone to people who are watching this right now in 3 states, wondering if you're dumb enough to do it on camera." He turned in a slow circle, phone up, so all of them could see. "Go on. Wave to everybody, deputy. Tell 'em your badge number while you're at it." Now, was that all the way true? Some of it. Tuck had been filming since the second cruiser showed. Whether it was live streaming to 3 states, well, that part was Boone playing the hand he had. But a bluff only works on a man who's got something to lose. And the second Boone said the word camera, he watched every one of those deputies do the same small thing. They looked at each other. That's it. That's all. They looked at each other, and in that look was every bit of the rot laid bare, because not a one of them trusted the man beside him to hold the line if the line meant going to prison. Bad men are only loyal until the price gets real. All that brotherhood, all that we take care of our own, it's only ever good weather talk. It doesn't survive the first man doing the math on his own kids and his own pension. And Boone had just made the price real in front of a lens, which meant there was no quiet way out of it anymore. There was only the way that ended with all of them, or the way that ended with one of them. The deputy out front knew it too. He could feel his little army going soft behind him. He'd built this thing on the certainty that when he moved, they moved with him, and now he was feeling that certainty come apart in the heat. And a man like that, when he feels his power slipping, he does the most dangerous thing there is. He decided he'd rather burn it all down than lose it. He swung the shotgun off the bikers and pointed it straight at Boone's chest. "You," he said, and his voice was shaking now, "you should have kept riding." "Yeah," Boone said, "people keep telling me that." And he took a step forward, right into the barrel. "Here's the thing you never figured, son. I'm 61. I got a bad heart and a worse liver and about the ugliest life you ever heard of behind me. You are not looking at a man who's scared to die on a highway, but you. He took another step. The barrel was almost at his chest now. You're 29, 30. You got a house, a truck payment, a whole life you built on nobody ever calling your bluff. And you are about to throw every bit of it into the fire over a girl whose shoes you took. On camera. In front of 40 witnesses. So go on. He spread his arms wide and his voice came up from somewhere deep and terrible and calm. Pull it and find out which one of us has more to lose. The whole world held its breath, and behind the deputy one of his own men said, "Man, I'm not doing this, I'm out." And he lowered his rifle and stepped back toward the cars. Then another. "I got 2 kids, Ray, I'm not dying for this." Then another, and this one said nothing at all, just clicked his safety back on and turned for his cruiser like he'd suddenly remembered somewhere else he had to be. The little machine came apart right there in the road, one bolt at a time, because that's how these things always end. Not with a war, with men remembering they've got mortgages. The deputy stood alone, shotgun shaking, sweat pouring down under those sunglasses. Everything he'd built his whole rotten life on, the certainty that the badge was a wall, gone, just gone, taken by an old biker in the middle of the road who wouldn't get face down. Boone reached out slow and put one of those big scarred hands right on the barrel of the shotgun. And gently, like you'd take a toy from a child, he pushed it down toward the asphalt. "Give it here," he said, and the deputy let go. You want to know what a man looks like when the thing he thought made him a god turns out to be nothing at all. He looked like a boy. He looked like he might be sick. He stood there in the road with empty hands while Boone cracked the shotgun open, thumbed out the shells one by one, and let them fall into the dust. Now here's the part I need you to hear, because it's the part that matters most. Boone didn't hit him. 40 men behind him, and every one of them would have followed if Boone had taken one swing. That deputy could have gone into the desert and never come out, and no one would ever have known. That's what the deputy expected. You could see it. He flinched, waiting for it, this man who'd made his whole living off of flinching people. And Boone Kessler just looked at him with something that was almost pity. "That's the difference between you and me," Boone said. "You had all this power, and the second you got it, you went looking for someone weaker to use it on. Me, I got 40 men who'll do anything I say, and I'm gonna use it to walk you to a phone." He nodded down the road east, where in the far distance, come up out of the same heat that had hidden all of this, another set of lights was coming. State lights, blue and gold. Because it turns out the girl at the diner, the one you scared so bad, she called somebody a week ago. State police. Somebody who'd been waiting for one more girl brave enough to talk. And funny thing about live video, deputy. It doesn't just go to bikers. The deputy turned and looked east at those state cruisers coming, and his knees actually buckled. 2 of his own former men caught him, not out of loyalty, but because they'd already figured out that the smart play now was to be seen helping. Delia came off the bike. On her own 2 feet, socks on the hot road, one hand on Diesel's gray head for balance. She walked out to the middle of Route 66 where Boone stood, and she looked at the man who'd blackened her eye and split her lip and taken her shoes, the man she'd been so sure no one on earth could touch. She didn't say anything cruel. She just looked at him a long moment. And then she turned her back on him, which is the loudest thing a person can do, and she looked up at Boone instead. "Why'd you stop?" she asked him. "All those cars drove past. Why'd you stop?" And Boone, he thought about it a second, like he wanted to give her a true answer instead of an easy one. "Because 30 years ago," he said, "there was a woman on the side of a road, and I was one of the cars that drove past. I was young and I was in a hurry, and I told myself it wasn't my business." He looked down the highway at nothing, at all of it. "I've been driving past her in my head every day since. I made myself a promise that if I ever got the chance again, I wasn't gonna be one of the cars. He put his hand on her shoulder, careful, gentle, this enormous man. You weren't on that road by accident, Delia Mercer. You were on it so I could keep a promise. Now come on. Let's get you to somebody who'll write it all down. The state police took the deputy in front of everybody, cuffed on the hood of his own cruiser under a sky the color of a hot coin. Turned out Boone was right about the other girls. 3 of them, once one was brave enough, came forward inside a month. Turned out the video was real enough. Turned out the wall was never a wall at all. It was just a story bad men told, and it only held up as long as everybody kept driving past. They got Delia to a hospital in Barstow. Cracked cheekbone, 2 broken fingers from where she'd put her hands up, and a whole lot of things that don't show on an X-ray. Boone stayed. 40 bikers filled up a waiting room built for maybe 10, and they scared the daylights out of the staff for about an hour until the nurses figured out they were the gentlest thing to come through those doors all week. One of them held a little girl's balloon while her daddy filled out paperwork. Tuck bought out the entire vending machine and set the snacks in a pile like an offering. Boone sat by Delia's bed with his notebook, the one for memorial names, but he didn't write a name of somebody gone. He turned to a fresh page, and at the top he wrote hers, Delia Mercer, and under it he wrote a date, and she asked him what that was for, and he said, "This is the book of people who mattered. Used to be I only wrote 'em in here after they were gone. I'm trying something new, writing some of 'em in while they're still around to argue about it." She laughed. It hurt her face, and she laughed anyway, and that sound, that was the whole thing right there. That was the whole reason he'd thrown up his fist and killed 40 engines in the middle of a memorial run. Now she didn't have anywhere to go. That came out slow, the way hard things do. The diner was tied to the deputy's cousin. The little room she rented came with the job. She'd been walking down Route 66 with no shoes because she had, in the truest sense, nowhere on this earth that was hers. Boone didn't make a speech about it. He just made a couple of calls. There was a woman up in the high desert, a widow of one of the club's own, ran a little place with too many empty rooms and not enough noise in them. By the end of the week, Delia had a bed that was hers, and a door that locked from the inside, and 40 phone numbers in a cheap phone that Tuck had pressed into her hand, in case, he'd said, and never finished the sentence because he didn't have to. She healed up. Slow, the way you do. Some things came back faster than others, but here's a thing I want to leave you with. About a year later, Boone Kessler was leading another run down that same stretch of Route 66. July again, hot again. Diesel in the sidecar, grayer now, slower, but still logging his miles. And up ahead on the shoulder there was a car pulled over, hood up, a family standing around it looking lost in the heat. Boone threw up his fist. 40 engines went quiet. And a young woman on the back of one of those bikes, in her own leather cut now, with a scar through one eyebrow that never quite faded, swung off before the wheels had stopped and walked up the shoulder to see what a stranger needed. Delia Mercer got there first. She crouched down, made herself small, and said the words somebody had once said to her. "Hey now, I'm not gonna touch you. I'm just gonna sit down right here." That's the thing about a promise kept. It doesn't stop with you. It gets on a bike and it rides down the highway and it stops for the next one and the next, and it never once drives past. A fist put Delia Mercer on the side of that road, but it wasn't a fist that got her up off it. It was a man who wouldn't keep riding, and an old 3-legged dog, and 40 engines going quiet in the heat. And every one of those cars that slowed down and stared and drove on, well, they got to keep on being one of the cars. Boone Kessler chose to be the one who stopped. You can be that one too. Next time you see somebody on the side of the road that the whole world's driving past, you slow down. You throw up your fist, you stop. That's the whole story. Ride safe out there. This now lands right around 4,990 words, inside the 4,805,200 window and on target. The hook is untouched, 150 words, opens on the fist. The false comment it was over. They were wrong is intact. The chapter 4 trigger, he's back. And he ain't alone. Still flips the conflict to the institution. The single CTA stays after the first payoff, and the ending from about a year later through Ride Safe Out There is verbatim. All pauses are single dots. The cuts came from tightening repeated phrasing in Boone's intro, Delia's account, and the standoff monologues, no beats removed. Want me to trim any further toward a hard 5,000, or is this good to ship?